Okay, welcome back, everyone. Uh, I hope you're rejuvenated over the 15-minute break here. I will mention that Tom's slides have been uploaded to the conductor page, so you can take a look at them directly. Also uploaded on the conductor page is the near final draft of the user's guide for ADAPT. This is the guide that was constructed by Gregory Allen at Mendocino College, who was part of the ADAPT development team, the initial grant from the state of California, and has been using it quite extensively the last couple of years, including building and testing out the learning trees, which is going to be a topic that we'll be doing in the next hour. However, before we get into this, and I again encourage you to take a look at this thing, it is very chemistry oriented, by the way. So if that is not 100% your ball of wax, please ignore some of the specifics off of here, but the logistics are pretty well put together. He did a nice job off of that. That will be coupled into a LibreText book instead of just a Word document, and also added to the Insight system so you can do searches in order to be able to find that. So we're going to transition into this session before lunch. It's going to be focusing on ADAPT again. And specifically, the first half of this session is going to be focusing on how to use ADAPT functionally in the classroom, specifically how you handle students enrolling, how to couple it into your learning management system, if you have different mechanisms in order to go about doing so. And then we're going to transition into learning trees, and give you a little bit of an overview of how to create learning trees such that you can play around with building those learning trees in the breakout room, in addition to an exercise that I'll be giving you addressing licensing. So with that at play, let's switch over to Adapt and get this thing going here. So um, 1 second here. So yesterday we went over how to build a course, how to build assignments, how to add assignments, how to clone assignments in order to how to clone questions in order to be able to customize those questions. But there's probably certainly a lot more that's involved in terms of how to build those questions and such. Tom showed you a little bit of the type of questions that you can use for chemistry, which has more advanced aspects. It's connected to iMath AS. For my chemistry class, I tend to use WebWork, but you have other capabilities in native and H5P that's out there. What I want to talk about right now is how you actually functionally use ADAPT in the classroom, which involves how students interact with ADAPT, how students get accounts on ADAPT, and how scores can be uploaded to your LMS, or how you can upload grades to your, or just get the download the spreadsheet in order to upload grades to your non-LMS submission process for grades, banner or other mechanism, depending upon your individual campus. So let's go to this. And I'm going to go to a class that I taught last term, which is my Chem 4B class, just to make things a little bit more convenient here. So this is the class that I have in place. My classes tend to be a bit more complicated than other classes. I have lecture homeworks, which are individual homeworks that students have to solve, typically 2 to 3 questions per lecture. It's about 15 of these homeworks per quarter, per 10-week session. I also have not just lecture homework, I have weekly homework right here, which consists of about 10 questions out there. And the point behind here is that you want students to constantly be turning and thinking and using their stuff, in addition to a handful of other things, including labs, including practice, formative use, including extra credit learning trees as I hone the learning trees to be useful for my class. This is going to be transitioning next year into 4 credit or required assignments for the students. So actually, I need to be very careful here in order to make sure I don't violate FERPA. So I'm going to go back to the new course that I made before, which has no students enrolled into it. So there are different mechanisms of how we actually operate. The first one I want to just talk about is how students enroll into the assignment. And they can enroll based on the way that you use uh, the course. So there are two general ways that we use courses. One is if the course is coupled to a learning management system. And for those of you in California, it's Canvas. And for half the world, it's Canvas right now. The other option is to actually use it outside of an LMS. And you can do that now. So even if your campus hasn't hooked up Adapt into your learning management system, because it requires some manual coupling and oversight in the new versions of what's called LTI, or Learning Tools Interoperability, you could still use Adapt. It's perfectly fine. In fact, that's the mechanism that I use and I've used for 15 to 20 different classes over the last 4 years. In about 70%, 75% or so of submissions are in courses that are not coupled to learning management systems. So you can go and start using Adapt right now without having to couple into your LMS and go through the infrastructure, although there are certainly benefits associated with doing so. So if you do couple your course into an LMS, you make it so that as soon as students submit an answer and it gets auto-graded, or if you use the open grader in order to be able to manually assign a grader, it will then be passed back to your learning management system within seconds. And that's convenient for obvious reasons, because the learning management system is the source of the grade book that students use, and the grade book that's connected to your course on Adapt is not meant for students in order to tap into. It's meant for you to be able to review if you decide that you want to go about doing so. So those are the two primary modes. I will mention that when you couple a course into an LMS, if your LMS is Canvas, you have two sort of options. Option number one is to couple it only with LTI. So LTI is a protocol that came around about 12 years ago. Originally, as part of a project that Chuck Severance at the University of Michigan started in order to see how you can actually communicate between an external vendor like Adapt to an LMS infrastructure. It's gone through several levels of development since it, and the current one is called 1.3. That's the version number. And it has a term that I think is advantage that typically people use. I might be incorrect on that term. And it has protections in order to ensure that the external vendor is only allowed to do certain things and only those certain things. So it's unable to be abused by the external vendor, because there are many external vendors that will abuse the connection to an LMS if they have the opportunity in order to do so. For example, there are external vendors that were able to harvest student information, their email addresses, their names, and other things via the old version of LTI. And the reason I'm emphasizing this is that the new version of LTI, the 1.3, requires manual integration between Adapt and their LMS at each campus. So each campus needs to approve and couple Adapt into their infrastructure. And that, while it's a super simple process from a technology perspective, can be a very time-consuming process depending upon the forms, bureaucracy, and the hoops that are necessary in order to jump through for those respective campuses, largely to deal with security and accessibility and other issues like that. So just as the other thing is that when Adapt can couple to a learning management system either via LTI. The other option is I can couple via LTI and API. So API is an application programming interface. You don't need to really know what that acronym means, but the key point of the API is it gives you expanded scope than what LTI alone is able to do. And as Cristina is going to show you momentarily, that expanded permission that the LTI plus API provides us with Canvas right now, although we'll expand it to other LMSs, makes things a lot easier for instructors in order to be able to use effectively with the LMS. Okay, so I'm going to try to chill with the acronyms here and show you a little bit of the details associated with it. So the first thing that's involved in a learning in ADAPT in using it in the classroom is asking, how do students get enrolled in the class? So instructors, and every instructor here, every user here has gotten an instructor account on ADAPT. You went through the same process, which consisted of us giving you an access code. It had a 48-hour lifespan behind that, and then of the code itself, you registered with the code, and then you got yourself an instructor account. And as an instructor, you then have access to the entire corpus of questions, or at least the questions that are publicly available. Private questions you don't have access to. It's obvious that that same process is not how we can operate with students, because we don't want students to have access to the entire corpus of questions. It defeats the point of using this as a homework system. So we transition away from using access codes in order to create accounts for students, and we allow, at least currently, students to create accounts themselves. And when you go to the front website of ADAPT, you have these two options, and students can create the accounts here, and while you can request in order to create accounts here, and we go through the access codes. So any student with any email address can create a student account right now as it currently stands. However, that doesn't mean you have access to anything as a student, because you need to be enrolled in the class. And at the point of being enrolled in the class is the point in where you need an enrollment code, which is similar to the access code for registering for the course. So every course has an access code that you can hand out to students in order to enroll. And that access code is available. Let me switch over here. Is available. I'm pulling up my new course here. It's available under course properties and sections. Now, the reason that's under sections is that you may have a course that will have multiple sections. For example, and I mentioned this yesterday, that if I teach a class with 500 students, I have 16 sections. Each section has their own lab time, their own discussion time, and the corresponding dates off of here, and they need to be coordinated at different times for different reasons, and they then have different access codes. When I upload scores, each student is technically enrolled in a section, not the course itself. Sarah, I'll address your question momentarily. So this course has a single section, which I called 1. Technically on my campus, it should be called A01, but that's just how my campus operates. There's a course registration number. This is optional in the sense that I don't care, or ADAPT doesn't care what that number happens to be, but that's oftentimes a number connected to that course. And that's important for uploading scores, at least on my side. If you're working with learning management system, these things don't matter at all. Then comes the access code. And this is the access code for this section. So if I were to add another section, 2-2, it then has a different access code. And then I hand out to the students the access codes, and say, if you're in section 1, use this access code. If you're in section 2, use this access code. And then it's ready to go. And then the students that already have their account can then enroll into the class. In fact, technically, anyone who's a student, has a student account, can enroll in this class if you were to share this code broadly. You have the ability, in order to trash multiple sections or add multiple sections via this interface. You have the ability, in order to reset the access code. At that point, that essentially invalidates the old access code. So that's a way in which you're saying no more enrollment, and that I don't want to work off of this. This is a real matter-of-fact, low-level approach in order to be able to handle enrollment via these access codes that you have out there. So, and obviously you can copy the access codes by just clicking on that blue blue clone system. So looks like Cristina was able to address the question in the chat. If you need more clarification, please let me know. So this is the simplest way. And this right here works well for non LMS enabled courses. um, but there's an issue that we have in play here. Because this system is set up based off of this access code, and anyone who has the access code can enroll, and anyone can create a student account as long as you have an email address that you can run into. We have situations where students will enroll with multiple email addresses. So, for example, let's say that I'm taking Tom Giesel's College of the Canyon introductory chemistry class, and I can come in with my College of the Canyon email address. As a student, I enroll and everything is fine. But then I decide I want to enroll into I make an account that is with my Gmail account. I can do that, or with my Yahoo account or Hotmail account, and I can create multiple accounts. And many of us have multiple email accounts to handle various needs, and students will do this too. And occasionally, actually quite often, we'll have students that come in and they will have 5 different accounts, email accounts, sorry, and student accounts, and they will also enroll those accounts into the course. And that makes the roster go crazy. So you have multiple individual people. It's hard to keep track of it. The students don't recognize that they are registered in one account versus another account. So they might come in and they get confused about their submissions. It gets mixed over their submissions gets mixed over multiple accounts and just becomes chaos. So in order to try to address that, we introduce a whitelist domain. And that is a little bit more complicated, but the idea behind it is that only students with email addresses that you have whitelisted here will be able to register with this account, even if they have the access code. So in my case, it just takes it from ucdavis.edu because that's the domain associated with my email address of this course. But at any point, I can come in and say gmail.com. And therefore, now anyone with a gmail.com email address can register. And this provides the opportunity in order to be targeted, but make sure that you reduce the issue that students have in terms of making multiple accounts and going a little bit crazy. Uh, that's the basic essence of whitelisting. So if your domain name of your email address is different than the domain name of the students on your campus, for example, many times they'll have students.coc.edu for College of the Canyons, and this is hypothetical, or mail.coc.edu or something like that. You'll want to make sure you put the whitelist out here, otherwise they're unable to register with those accounts. There was a question that popped up that Josh said, if you invalidate the access code, is the old work delete? No, this has no effect on work. This has effect only on enrolling in the class. And it basically removes the ability to enroll in the class and such. You always need at least one whitelist that's on the case here. Now, I will mention that by the end of this summer, we will have a rostering system, and this is going to dovetail into the LMS courses. The rostering system will set up so that you can put in to here a list of email addresses of every student in your class, assuming you're able to get a list of emails. Some Canvas instances don't provide the emails of their students, which can be sometimes confusing. And then you just pop it into there, and then they'll send out emails to the students saying, you are now enrolled in this class, and then that's that. So then they don't go through an enrollment. They won't go through an enrollment code, and the whitelist will no longer matter. That option will be available soon. In some cases, in many cases, that's probably the preferred way to do it instead of the current way that we have off of here. Okay, so is that pretty cool with everybody so far?
Yes.
Lathante, will the domain whitelist automatically when we create the assignments? I think there's a verb missing there. Do you think you can? So this right here is operating at the course level. It has nothing to do with the assignment levels. And this operates only for enrolling in the class. So once someone has gone into enrollment in the class, everything here has no effect at all. Hopefully that addresses your question. If it didn't, please please let me know, and then we can try to address it again.
Can the instructor unenroll someone?
Yes, and I'll show you that in a moment if I have the FERPA protections set up for that specific page. Otherwise, I can't show it to you here because I would show it with real students with real email addresses, and that I can't do in a public recording or a public situation. Okay, so um, I'm just going to delete that section, even though it doesn't really matter too much. And that's it. So if I go to students here, I will have a list of every student that's enrolled in this class. Now, obviously, I don't have any students enrolled in this class right now. But nonetheless, it's available in order to be able to get the list of students and identify what's going on for here. Okay, now that's fine and dandy. That works quite well with non-LMS courses. The way that we operate LMS courses with grades is that we have a grade book. As I mentioned to you before yesterday, we have two types of grade books. We have the grade book for the course and the grade book for the assignment, which gives us more power than what the grade book on Canvas provides. But this is a mechanism. You use the gradebook here. The students would use the gradebook in the same way that they would on their LMS because it operates in the same way off this perspective. I can't show you this in action either because I don't have, actually I do have this. I will give me 1 second in order to go to my other class because I do have a FERPA protection rule on here so I can actually show you what this looks like with fake names and fake email addresses, which I am allowed to do. So 1 moment. Okay. I have a little option here that says FERPA for presentation. So this right here is the grade book that we have. It's non-expanded. These are the names. These are the email addresses. Again, these are all fake off of here. And then these are all the sections that we have for the grade book that's there. That's out there, including even the grades. I like to have a little bit more numerics with z-scores and the weighted score is the rubric that we use for mathematics. I use this instead of my learning management system because I have a lot more control over things than I do with Canvas, and I just like to have more control over it. I have the ability in order to look at mean. At any point, if I want to, I can actually flip a switch here and check to see time on task. That's the amount of time that students have spent doing each assignment. When I look at this at the assignment level, it'll show it for each question. And time in review is the time that students spent reviewing the question after the deadline. So using the homework as a study guide or learning resource, not just as an assessment resource. These things are also shown on the learning analytics dashboard that I hinted at a little bit yesterday or showed you one snapshot, and the full blown version of it will be released in a few weeks for everyone's review. So it's a grade book, just like any other grade book in the way it operates. But I also have the ability in order to download the scores of this grade book into an Excel form. And then I can use that to upload to my learning management system. So if I have the situation where it's uncoupled from my LMS, I can click this button, get the scores, and then upload automatically to my LMS so that I can actually use my LMS for functional interface to the students, but they don't need to have the LTI interface in place in order to be able to deal with that. And many faculty use that mechanism instead of the LTI interface in order to do these things automatically. So you're enabled, even if you don't have LTI hooked into your, even if you don't have your campus LMS hooked into Adapt via LTI, you can still use it functionally the same way, and many faculty do like that. So the other aspect that we want to talk about is being able to couple your course into your LMS. And at this point, you need to take your course, and your course needs to be designated as a LMS course. Now, My campus is not, as the University of California, Davis hasn't set up the Canvas administrator, hasn't set up Canvas to adapt via LTI. And that's just paperwork that I need to do. So I can only operate off of LMS directly. However, I pick a different campus that I happen to be connected to. And we just heard from College of the Canyons. So where are we here? There is, this does a list through all North American schools, which is actually a lot. So sometimes it takes a little bit of time here. I'll do Chabot. This will take a quick second in order to pop up, since this is also set up. So let's say that I got a status with Chabot. So in this case here, I'm now a colleague of Cristina Moon's, and she has set up LMS. So now I have this option of being able to say that's hooked in. If I click yes, I now have the ability to hook up my Adapt course to a course, an existing course in Canvas. And the procedure in order to do that depends upon whether this is 100% LTI or an LTI API mixture. And that's connected to the nature of the connection. So at this stage here, this is where we're at right now. And I'd like to hand this off to Cristina Moon to show you how Adapt couples to Canvas functionally, because I can't do that from my campus side because I haven't set it up, but Chabot is able to do that. So can you grab the screen, Cristina, and show us your magic?
I'll do that. So Delmar showed how to grab that code. So that is probably the first thing that you want to get. And so you go to course properties, the course that you choose to connect to. One thing about Canvas and Adapt. If, for example, if you have 4 sections of the same course that you teach and you have 4 Canvas shells, you will need 4 Adapt courses. So again, if your college lets you combine and cross-list all these sections into one ginormous Canvas site, then you don't have that problem. But for example, at my college, we are not allowed to combine sections anymore. So I teach 3 sections of Spanish 1A. I have 3 Canvas shells, basically. So which means I need 3 Adapt courses. So what I do is just create one for section 1, and then I copy the course 2 times. Then I have 3 sections, section 1, 2, 3. I have the same way, so you have to match the same number of Canvas courses to the same number of Adapt courses. So once you have this code, you will go to Canvas, create an assignment. So I'm gonna call this Adapt Module 2 assignment. And you will have to let the students know this code the first time they enter. So they won't be asked this again. So, but it's the first time they enter and click on the link below, they'll be asked for the code. So this is, make sure to enter this course code the first time you access Adapt. Right, and I should usually put it big, bold, so they can see this code. And from here, you will choose an external tool. And if your college has done the LTI, you will go to the list of LTIs that have been turned on at your college, and you will see Adapt right there. You can go right now and see if your college has it. That means that the LTI has been done, and that's it. You will select this box, load this tool in a new tab. If not, you'll get an error message. And then from here, what I like to consider this is like opening and closing gates. This is where you're gonna publish it and close it. So basically I control when the assignment gets released to the students. From here, I put the actual due date and I close it when it's over. So once I save it, you will see this load. So if you have used LTIs before, it's not different from anything that you've done before. So you will click on this, and then you will get this box and all the courses that are available. So I am hooking up to, I think it's this one that I did. Yeah. This is the course. And only the modules that have not been assigned will show up. So this is a nice thing. So all the modules that have been linked, for example, module 1 has already been linked, so that's why it's not showing up. But anything that has not been linked will show up. So module 2, and that's it. And now module 2 is linked. And what's nice about this is also, this is new, is you see this little chain. It shows you which ones have been connected. In the past, that didn't exist. So I didn't know which ones I connected and which ones I didn't. But this shows that module 1 and 2 assignments have been already linked up in Canvas. That's all I have. Oh, so once you have created an assignment and is published, you will see it in your gradebook. As, where are you? Adapt module. Oh, did I put points? I probably didn't put points. It will show up here as one of the assignments and with the group. I don't think I saved it with the points. That's why it's not showing up. So in terms of connecting it, it's pretty easy now. If you have the API, is that what it's called, Delmar? The assignments mirror what you have here. So it's actually, our college hasn't done the next step. So we have I don't know what you call this, the low end of the LTI connection. And so which manually I have to create the assignments. But if you do the other one, it will create automatically these assignments and it will mirror the adapt side with the Canvas side.
And I have a video in order to show that. So
that's all I have.
Great. Thank you very much, Cristina. Let me take the screen. I mentioned that there was this insight system, which is meant to be a quick search through our list of knowledge pages. This is separate from our textbook pages. I put a link to it in the chat. It's really useful if you just have a question on something like LTI, and then it'll come up with the sections that deal and address with LTI, although it's connecting it to 2 for some reason, because it's very simple. So I will let Cristina address Carla's question in a moment, but if you go to the insight, there are 2 pages that address coupling adapt to Canvas, and we're just using Canvas as an example right now. There are other examples in our user's guide in terms of coupling to Blackboard, and then the other LMSs will be available soon. So what Cristina showed was the coupling of adapt to Canvas via LTI only, and there are some videos that go through the exact same process, which is done at the assignment by assignment level. However, the power of the, let's say, the creme de la creme interface, the LTI plus API, is to be able to create your assignments automatically. So the way that mechanism works is when you create a course up, so you create a course up in Adapt. It has all your assignments. You have everything all put together here. And if you have this special interface that more and more campuses have set up, and Chabot has not set up, you'll have an extra option that you can click on here. And when you press this button here, I should expand this out. So this is a LMS course where the LMS that's to couple with has the advanced API and LTI interface. And you have this option that comes up here. This did not show up in Cristina's course because, again, her LMS is not connected in the advanced way. And then when you click on the button here, it's just a 2-button option that when you click on this thing, you are granting access between and authorizing Adapt to talk to your courses, and you just select the course that you're using. And he just had one example here that's an empty Canvas course. And then it automatically creates every single assignment that's an Adapt. It creates it into Canvas. It links them all up manually. So all the little steps that Cristina put down there is all handled appropriately, couples every single point numbering, every single dates and everything all appropriately, poof, like that, with just 2 buttons. Approve and select the course that you want to do. And this is immensely faster than the manual process that we have in place for just LTI by itself and its base form. And that's the reason why we advanced that, and we're not going to listen to Eraser. Again, there are videos right in the Insight thing. I showed you one of them. You can take a closer look at it. The key point is that with this advanced features, it's just a super simple click, and then you're ready to rock in order to do that, instead of doing the manual process that's in place. So there were a few questions that popped up here. One was asking about the student mode. I'm not sure if Cristina can show that on her side, or if that's something that requires a bit more effort, because again, I'm not that proficient in Canvas.
It looks the same. I mean, it's if you have created assignments. Do you want me to show quickly? I just have it
can
on
you do
pad.
that? That
Yeah.
might be easier than to describe.
So this is what the student will see, right? And it's an assignment. We will have the due date, the points. It will show that it's an external tool, and they will have this bar, the gray bar, and it takes the name of the assignment. So if you call it module 1, it will say load module 1 in a new window. They click on that, and it will take them. It will open up straight to the actual assignment. So students, it makes it very easy. You know, they click on this for that module, and then the moment they complete the assignment, that will load up immediately in the gradebook in Canvas. So
there you go. And the one thing that we want to do, and I mentioned this before the break, I think, was to make it so that instead of opening up, doing deep linking, it basically embeds it into the page right there, so you can actually go through it without the much of the interface around Adapt. But that also means that you'll lose some of the features that we want to have, including, for example, resources that we want to be able to have faculty in order to build resources that students can access in order to be able to do the problems that they're doing. And this is especially important in the STEM fields or chemistry, where we have a set of data tables that we want students to be able to tap into, and a consistent data table that we want them to do, so that the math is actually done right and they don't grab other tables with other data. So that may not be entirely that beneficial once we actually put it together. So that was largely what we wanted to address in terms of how you functionally use Adapt in the classroom, and how students interact with it. If there are no other questions, we can actually transition into learning trees.
I do have one question.
Yes.
This is Ricardo Castillo from Santa Ana College. If my college is able to set up the advanced features like you just mentioned, what about from semester to semester, copying courses in Canvas? If I have one previously set up with Adapt, is it that simple to copy my shell and everything else gets copied?
So there's a little bit of complexity behind that, and we're also expanding this in part via our partnership with Maricopa Community College District. So right now, you can, in Adapt, come in and copy an old course. And when you copy the old course, it will give you the option in order to shift the dates and times in order to reflect the new section. So you can do it automatically. That right there is not the same question that you asked, which was if you copy the Canvas course, which has all the things connected to that. And we had that functioning in a rinky-dink mode really quickly this winter, because we were asked very quickly in order to do it, such that you can create a course up. And when you duplicate it, the way Adapt operates is a bit more complicated. So you have to duplicate on Adapt, and then link everything together automatically. And Connect, I think, does that, the Pricey Pearson product and other things. We will have that thing put in place and honed, because right now it operates, but we want to be able to tweak it. And a few other features that were requested from Maricopa, in part in order to handle sort of these primary classes that you can then have secondary classes that you can copy for adjuncts and bring everything together. So we have most of what you're doing, but not all, and it needs to be tweaked a little bit in order to be able to do what you want. And we will have that functioning sometime this year, maybe by the end of the summer, but most likely in fall, to be honest, the way our schedule's going. So the way that you would do that is you'd have to create the course and then use this, click the button, and then just repopulate the assignment in the new course that's in there, which may or may not be too complicated in order to be able to do. Canvas is a little bit awkward in order to delete modules. So if you have a lot of modules, it may take you a few moments in order to be able to delete them, unfortunately, but that's technology that I don't have any control over. So any other questions that anyone may have? Okay, so in this case here, I'm going to take the screen and we're going to transition into some more advanced adapting. So again, I gave a link to the Insight system, which is available on the Launchpad. Sorry, I'm just trying to pull up the chat, which continually disappears every time I take the screen. Okay, I'm going to skip this and let's talk about learning trees. And the user manual that I uploaded about an hour ago into the conductor page that Greg Allen put together does a beautiful introduction to learning trees, and I encourage you to take a look at that at your leisure. I'm just going to give you a topical overview that we have here. So the idea behind a learning tree, and I'm going to do this real time instead of the picture that we have here, is to provide an adaptive learning. I'm going to look not at my trees, but at all the total trees that are out there. So let's say I'm grabbing this one right here. So the idea behind a learning tree is, instead of giving a single question that students are supposed to answer, let's make the homework system not just assessment, but a learning experience for students. And that means that there needs to be something that resembles how tutors would operate, where in a sense a personal tutor would come in, a human that is, and the student would do a problem, and then they come in and guide the student and say, well, you have some problems here, you have some problems here, and try to decompose the question into its constituent skills that are necessary to be successful, and then move forward. Now, that right there falls into the general category of adaptive learning. And adaptive learning, if you're familiar with it, is a spectrum of technologies that center around the point of making it so that the student's interaction adapts to the nature of the student, or the profile of the student, or how much the student has learned, or activities in which a student has done, under the argument that every student requires some level of customization in their education to suit their individual needs. Carla asked a question: when will the document with adapt instructions be ready for us to review? It's already uploaded on the conductor page, the same area that has the PowerPoint presentations and slide decks that we've been doing. So in the spectrum of adaptive learning, we have complicated adaptive learning stuff and we have simple adaptive learning stuff. So the complicated stuff is the stuff that we are familiar with and we hear a lot in the news. So it's the black box, the algorithm, AI, machine learning, neural nets. It's a complicated infrastructure set up in order to be able to profile students' understanding and then use that as a mechanism in order to guide the student around new education, new learning, new remediation in order to fill in the gaps that they need in order to be successful for those questions. The other side is a very simple approach that's based off of decision trees. Decision trees, or what's on the screen right now, we call them learning trees within the context of ADAPT. And it's basically a mechanism that shows like it acts like a flow chart, such that students can interact with the tree and migrate through different parts of the tree, going to different nodes, where each part of this thing is a node, in order to be able to get their learning experience. The difference between the black box algorithm-based approach is that this one here is a choose your own adventure story like approach. So students can come into the tree and then they have the ability in order to guide themselves in the tree. So they have agency. And in black boxes like Alex and other things, you don't have agency. You're sitting there like a baby in the kitchen, and you're being spoon-fed problem after problem after problem. And in many circumstances, the student doesn't know why they're doing a problem. Even the faculty don't know why they're doing the problems. Even the company doesn't know why they do the problem, because the black box is a black box. They don't fully understand how the neural net operates and things like that. And this is something that you may, or an argument you may have heard in AI and large language models, the inability to understand how it operates, but yet it functions. Now, the problem that we have with the black box extends beyond just not building robust students by removing agency. It's also pretty pricey in order to be able to establish something like this. It takes a long time in order to make sure it works well, and many times it just doesn't work very well. The white box approach is useful because you can look into it, you can understand how it operates, you can introduce new approaches in order to be able to make it work. And it's the approach that we chose in order to be able to do this. Although we have some intent to put into ADAPT more algorithmic based adaptive learning in the near future, but it's not here right now. So that's the basis of a learning tree. So how does the learning tree function? Well, the traditional way of which a learning tree functions, a traditional way in which students deal with questions is like what Tom mentioned before. You have a course, the course has assignments have questions, the assignment opens up at this date and time, closes at this date and time, students do the questions. Now, yes, you have the ability in order to make those questions algorithmic so that the numbers change from student to student. You have the ability in order to make sampling and pooling from different sets of questions in order to make it, but it's still a traditional sense that these are 10 questions that the students have to solve, and they go through question 1, question 2, question 3, question 4, and that's that. The learning tree is a little bit different in its approach. It's basically saying instead of giving students a series of 10 questions, we give them a series of 10 trees. So in that case there, you can call the assignment an orchard instead of a assignment, but it's still a collection of these things. And instead of having a single question that the student evaluates, each question, which we call a root question, is the top of a tree that consists of multiple nodes that is able to decompose the question into its constituent components that's necessary to be successful. So at that point, the questions that you have for learning trees are typically multi-component questions, or at least multi-concept questions in order to be able to address. Otherwise, there really wouldn't be much of a need to have an expansive learning tree behind it. The nodes in the learning tree consist of either assessments or expositions. Assessments are in blue, expositions are in red. So anytime I click on one of these nodes that's blue, it looks like a question meant to evaluate or assess the student's knowledge off of these things. If I click on a red thing, it's exposition. So in this case here, this is an exposition. It's a special exposition node that we put right after the root question to tell the student about what the learning tree is supposed to do. In other words, give them some guidance in terms of using the learning tree. And the second one is to tell them what type of skills that they need to master or at least be competent in order to be able to demonstrate proficiency of the root question. So you could think of this as being something akin to a little mini concept map associated with a specific question. Now, I've wanted to use concept maps for a long time in my classes, but I've never been able to figure out how to do it effectively because I can't do it. This provides a mechanism in order to provide concept maps, little snippets of the concept map for the entire course, such that students are able to see what is connected and how the concepts work together in order to build these questions. So it's rewarding for multiple reasons, and this is one of the bigger reasons that's offered here. Ricardo asked the questions, do the nodes have difficulty letting level settings? Not yet. We do have the opportunity in order to add additional meta tags in order to be able to do this. We provide commentary or notes at the bottom of these trees and these nodes that you can add into in order to provide the context that includes difficulty or other aspects that may be of particular importance for you. So, yes, Mohammed.
The hints in the question, don't they serve the same purpose?
Well, they in some cases, yes, right? I mean, the hints are meant in order to be able to address this, but this gives you a lot more finesse, and the hints are not adaptive in that the hints for every student is the same, but there may be situations where one skill for one student is the rate determining step, to use the chemistry term, but a different student may have a different rate determining step, and that hint may carry no weight at all for that. So the point here is the adaptive aspect in order to be able to provide it so that the students that need assistance in one way, they can fill in that gap without dealing with the other aspects that's there. And hints just don't do that. But they're a good starting point in the absence of having a hint. Compared to absolute. So this is a general template that we have for our strategy maps, which is the term that we use for describing this first exposition mode. This is taken after a term used up in Thompson River College that's doing something similar with their approach in ADAPT. So anyways, let me talk about this. So the student comes in, they get a root question, let's say they get it wrong. If they get it right, it doesn't matter all the stuff below it. They don't need it. There's no need for remediation. There's no need to force the students in order to do work that they don't have to do if they demonstrate proficiency in the question that you give to you. So it's already more efficient way in order to do things than a traditional way. Student comes in and they get the opportunity in order to do it over. So that's the carrot that we have, that they can get a do-over in order to do this question again. But in order to get the do-over, they need to spend time in the tree or do some criteria in the tree that we have here. The criterion that we have selected is that they need to start from the top and go to the bottom. One pathway. So they can come in this direction, they can come in this direction, they can come in this direction. Each branch is meant to address a specific aspect or skill necessary to be successful in this assessment, or a different approach in order to address that skill. For example, you'll see that we have two trees here. This one here is the definition of significant figures, saying that they need to understand significant figures to answer that question. If you're unfamiliar with significant figures, just think of it as some other concept that's important for the question in your own field. And this is just text. So it's just saying, okay, well, this is the definition of significant figures. Here are some examples, and here are some things off of here in order to be able to do simple exposition. Many times these are just basically snippets that can be cut out of the textbook. And with 1 million pages of OER content, we have a lot of possible things off here, but it's targeted. It's not meant to be a whole page that has lots of other things off it. It's just saying, this is what you need in order to answer the question. Learn this part. But you may be able to make an exposition that's a video. So in this case here, we can upload a video. This is a YouTube video. We also have some that are internal to the conductor system, which is a video repository that I'll be talking about tomorrow. And if the student decides that they are more inclined to learn from a video than they are about text, because that's how they actually tend to learn, then they can go through the video mechanism in order to address it if it addresses the same skill. In this case here, it's a slightly different skill that they want to go about doing in order to be able to recognize it. And then after they go through some exposition, and you can have multiple nodes here. If it's a complex structure that you want to be able to spoon feed the actual aspects that are necessary in order to understand that. And then we have one or multiple expositions to say, do you understand that specific skill? So this is a root assessment. And in this case here, it's just meant to be a refined aspect. So this is exactly what you do when you're tutoring, right? You have a complicated question, the student fails on it, you identify the question, or you help the student identify the question that they, or the part of the question that they failed on that they need to master. And then you give them a simple question to see if they actually demonstrated that they understand that question, that skill. And then you go back to the question at the start again and say, now let's take a look at this now that you understand the specific concept. But in contrast to a tutor, we don't have a human doing this. We're giving the students agency in order to be able to do this. And that right there I like a lot, because it's not just spoon feeding. It's not just giving students agency so they're more engaged. It provides an opportunity for students to hone their metacognition skills so they can identify what do they know and what do they not know, and then target along the direction off of there. And that builds stronger students, stronger graduates, better learners by far than a spoon feeding idiot box that just happens to take $1 million in order to build. I have strong opinions about that. So anyways, this is the basic principles of how a learning tree operates. The students get the do-over when they go from the top to the bottom. If it is a exposition node, they have to spend a certain amount of time with the node. That's how we designate success. If it is an assessment node, they have to demonstrate a certain proficiency of success on that. And that could be 100%, 90%, or however you decide that you want to operate and build this learning tree that's out there. There's lots of evidence that these learning trees are superior than just a single question out there. So why don't we use this for everything and adapt? It takes a long time to build a learning tree. This right here just has 2 breakdowns off of here, but I can imagine questions that may have 5 different components that are connected to here. It even gets more complicated because in chemistry, one of the bigger issues that we have, at least in many of our questions, is that students don't have the mathematical background in order to be able to understand things very well. So for example, if you're dealing with a question that involves pH, oftentimes you need to do some sort of logarithm calculation for here. And many students are poorly prepared these days in order to understand logarithms. However, I can add a branch here that says, here is logarithm. Do you understand logarithms? Can you move forward and get the targeted aspect in order to be able to do that? So you can get a refresher on logarithms, and then you can go back in order to answer this question right there. So you're not limited to just the components necessary in your field, but all the components that you feel are necessary in order to be successful in that. And in chemistry, that involves math, it may involve some physics, and bring these things out here. So you can make really robust learning trees that are really very powerful in order to be able to guide students in order to be successful. The issue is, again, the time it takes in order to build these learning trees. And we're building these learning trees slowly, focusing initially on general chemistry. We have about 300 questions in our collection. Most of them are in chemistry, and we're expanding greatly off of that, in part to a graduate student that's in my group. That his summer task is just to build these learning trees out there. But this should be applicable across the board. The last thing before we start talking about building trees is to comment about proficiency or performance versus learning. We like to believe that homework assesses learning, but learning is actually a 2-step process or a 2-point process. It's what do students know at one time, they learn, and then demonstrate that knowledge at a second time. So you need a pre and post in order to be able to evaluate learning. A single question in a homework doesn't evaluate learning. It evaluates performance. It evaluates, does the student understand that question at the point that you're testing it? But it doesn't mean that that student may have learned how to solve that question in your class. They may have learned it before. It doesn't necessarily demonstrate that you are a good instructor if the student does well on that that question. The learning tree intrinsically has a pre and post, because the student, when they go into the learning tree, we get the initial value of their proficiency. Then they go through the learning tree and they learn, and then afterwards we can demonstrate their performance afterwards. That's the post. And the difference between the two is the learning that they get from the learning tree. And it's not surprising that, yes, the learning tree does what we want it to do, because they are demonstrating better performance after learning tree than before, and such. And that's what you don't get from a single point question. And that's just an educational side off of it. So we have about 10 to 15 minutes in order to talk about learning trees, and then we'll take a break. We're a little bit late, which I blame myself for. And then after lunch, we're going to go into building these trees. So you guys ready? Did I scare you off from learning trees? I think learning trees are the coolest thing in the world. No one seems to chime in to think that you think the same.
How we arrive at this learning tree?
How we're going to build a learning tree. That's what we're doing
No,
right
how
now.
we arrive at, if I want to see where are they and
Oh, how to find them?
yes.
If you go into dashboard, you'll see brown learning trees. And those are all the public learning trees. And these are the public learning trees that we have here. If you click on this thing, we have a lot of learning trees put in place. You can see some of these people have already started to process some of these learning trees, some in organic chemistry, mostly in general and introductory chemistry that's out there. I would love to see the day where every single question that we have is really a learning tree and not an individual tree out there. But that's going to take a lot of effort in order to be able to do. So let's see here. There are a few questions here. Chris asks, I assume that we would not be using existing learning. Yeah, you can use it summatively. So the way that we use learning trees summatively is essentially the performance at the root question is their grade. So we don't give them points or activity for actually interacting with the learning tree. The only thing that we care about is, did they actually demonstrate, did they actually have proficiency in that question? So if they got the question right, the root question, and they don't need to go in the learning tree, they get just as many points as if they went to the learning tree, learned, and came back and demonstrated proficiency. There are ways in order to add penalties onto it, but I don't encourage it. I think it's best in order to be able to do it in this way. We also track how students interact with the learning tree in order to guide what pathways are the students that are more successful statistically, not successful, but students want to be able to evolve off and such. But the idea of being able to track trajectories is actually a relatively new concept of analytics, and I found very few things out there in literature in order to be able to evaluate these things. The one exception is actually in single molecule spectroscopy, which can deal with these things via what's called Markov chains or non-Markov chains and things like that. But that's a bit more advanced than our conversation right here. So before I answer Martin's question, Chris, I think revised her question. I said the wrong way. I meant to mean formatively. Okay, so you can use it formatively. So I have them right now in my course formatively as extra credit. So it's not quite formative, it's formative optional credit in order to test them out and play with it. Every student that uses them likes them a lot, as long as all the components are all put together. It's also a great learning resource. The students can come back and learn what's necessary in order to be successful on a question and go through it and explore it. And we find that students are more engaged and interacting with the learning tree after the question is the deadline is over than if it were a traditional question that's out there. And I think it's just because their engagement is much greater and they have a greater knowledge about it and they understand, they get a better picture of it. It's basically a win-win situation across the board off of that. So I think Martin's hand was up before Alex.
Yeah, is there a way to search or browse the library of learning trees with keywords or tags?
Not yet, but we will expand that. So we well, right now you can do a search through title and author. This will be expanded through keywords and other things. So you have the problem and the issue with learning trees is the level of complexity. So what you're doing is you're combining questions that are normally standalone and put them together in a specific order. So each question has its own meta tags and metadata. Each exposition has its own metadata connected. Each tree has its own metadata, and trying to figure out exactly the best way in order to navigate that has been an issue for us. It's not rocket science, which we just need to play around with it a little bit that's there. So right now, it's largely the best thing is to expand the scope here and then do a quick search that's on the case here. I can guarantee you if you're not in chemistry, there are very few learning trees available for you to tap into, but that doesn't mean you can't start adding those learning trees that are there. So yes, Alex.
So I was wondering if we can mix and match what's out there. So can I take some of those, I'm sorry for my lack of terminology, but those boxes that you have
Nodes.
Notes, and can I mix and match them into a new learning tree that I create?
Yes. So each one of these boxes is a node. Each one of these things here is a branch. So typically there's a one branch off of here. You can build different topologies. This was the topology that we felt that was most applicable for what we wanted to be able to do. So you have the ability to clone an existing tree, just like you have for cloning existing problems. So you can take a tree that you like and then start to restructure it and add these components as necessary in order to be able to advance it. And that's what we're going to be stepping through here. What we want to be able to do is ultimately create a little mini library of branches, because each branch focuses on a specific skill. So you may have that same skill in multiple learning trees. So there's no reason to rebuild that. Is to be able to come in and say, I want branch dealing with this specific skill, and I pop it in. And that requires a little bit of finesse for us to be able to do. We will get it there as we start to evolve to learning trees being the how things operate. Like I said, learning trees are a win-win situation for everybody.
Yay, thank you. This is wonderful, Delmar. Thank you so much.
So let's talk about building learning trees, and then we'll go to lunch. And we'll probably start up a little bit after lunch for learning trees, because I want to make sure that I'm somewhat on schedule and I don't want to go through these things. So at any point, and you go to your dashboard and you go to My Learning Trees. And my learning trees are the trees that are mine for obvious reasons that may be in that list that I showed. But if I make a learning tree that's private, it's not going to be in that list. Just like it would be if it were an individual question that I made private and other people wouldn't be able to find. So at any point, these are the trees that I create. I can make a new learning tree here, just like I did with a new course or a new assignment, or I can clone a learning tree, which is the equivalent of import a learning tree. If I clone a learning tree, I need to give it the number or the ID number or the tree ID number. The tree ID number is different than the question ID number that you have right here. So if I click on any of these things, the interface looks slightly different than what I showed when I was browsing the tree, because I have this additional window right here that gives me the ability in order to edit the tree in various ways. So this right here is a monstrosity of a thing, but it does show you a little bit of flexibility that you have here. So at any point that I have this tree, and I'm just going to show it to you, and then you can start playing with it, I can click on one of these nodes and I can pull it off and restructure it. And this is how we organize the structure that's there. So you can come in and you could change these things in a wide variety of ways. You can make something that looks really weird like this. The problem with this different type of topology, different structure here, is that it's difficult for students to understand how to actually operate it. So the better approach is to have a single branch that's there that looks something like this, where each branch has the option they're able to go into. Now, can we make more complicated trees that are functionally useful? Yes. We can make something where you can have branches at this point that you can actually move down and be able to do something that looks more like a traditional decision tree based approach, but we haven't addressed that yet because we know that there are issues in terms of the complexity of a learning tree and the student being able to understand how to effectively use the learning tree and put that in place. So let me go back to my learning trees. And everybody, hopefully you have your screen open, and we're going to make a learning tree out here. And I just click a new learning tree. I make a new learning tree and I put title, some of the meta tags that Martin was asked about, new learning tree. The public description, this is a special tree. I would do a poem about trees, but I can't remember the poem of how much I love the tree poem. Private note, I hate trees. Okay, I can decide if I want this to be public or private. By default, we make it private so that we don't gum up the overall library with stuff that's in progress and make it more complicated for things. And I press save. Okay, and now it makes the start of the learning tree, which is nothing because nothing has been created here. Now, remember the structure that we have for a traditional approach is a course, assignment, tree. Course, assignment, question, and that's it. This is more complicated because what we have are course, assignment, tree, and now in the tree, we have nodes that are structured, and inside each node is a question. So it becomes a 5-layered sandwich instead of a 3-layered sandwich. So instead of a bologna sandwich, it's now a club sandwich. And it adds these additional layers and it gets a bit more complicated. Once you get comfortable with it, which is relatively quick, it's not too hard in order to understand that. So it's, again, the way the tree operates in a course is a course, an assignment, a tree. A tree then has multiple nodes that are in a certain topology, and then each node has a single question. So we have this additional 2 layers of hierarchy. So anytime that we want to build a node, we can do that and it will make an empty node. So I can do an empty node here just by add node and I can pop it on here. When it's gray, it means it's an empty node. It means it has no question connected to it or nor any exposition connected to it. And I can come in and I can create the structure that I want, which typically looks like this. In fact, I should make a default that has this popping up. I've just made a tree of nodes, but each node is empty. So it's not a terribly useful tree. So if I click on one of these nodes, it comes up with empty. Nothing is on here. So this would not be a very good tree in order to give students in order to be able to do. So that's the starting point in order to be able to reference it. Now you have the ability of adding a node with a question directly into it if you type in the ID number for that question. So for example, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to take a look at one of my courses. So let's say that it's introductory chemistry course. This is a more advanced course than the chemistry course that actually that's not what I want. I grabbed the wrong thing that we're still updating. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to feel that this course right here, this question right here, I want this question to be the root question. So it's a simple multiple choice question. It's a pretty simple question. It may be too simple for a root question because I don't have a series of skills necessary in order to master it, but I can copy this code. I can come back up here and paste this code and add a node. And now it has added a node with that question added into it. So you can think of these nodes as boxes, and in a box, you put the question that's at hand by adding this thing. And that right there is the easiest way in order to build a tree, is just build the structure. At any point here, I can paste in the code that I want. So I'm going to refresh the node, and now I've just added that question into here. So instead of gray, it then becomes blue because it's an assessment node. And that's it. The only other trick that we have here is to recognize that the questions that we have may not be real questions. I didn't describe that very well. Let me describe this differently. You may remember when we were talking about building questions yesterday, there were some options with the questions that had, let's say I want to build a question. Martin, I'll talk about how students interact with the trees in the after lunch. So if I want to add a question, I had this option. Sorry, I wanted to make a new question. I had this option up here that I told you to skip yesterday and just said make everything question. But you have the ability in order to make exposition. Those are those red blocks. They're stored in the same database that we have, but when you click on it, it removes all the other stuff and just basically has a text block. So there's no auto-graded, there's no ancillary materials. All that stuff is gone. This is just exposition. And this is where you can add videos, you can embed text, you can embed interactive simulations. So if you have some JavaScript widget or something, you can embed that into this HTML block. And it could be a guided inquiry-based exposition, which in many cases can be quite rewarding for students to interact with instead of just giving them text or video in order to do it, or audio if it's important for you to be able to emphasize certain things that's off of here. You have lots of flexibility in order to decide what you want your expositions to look like. And it's up to you to decide what you feel the tree, what the students need that will be used in the trees that's out there. And that right there is an exposition. And you can do searches through expositions in the search option. It's one of the search options that I skipped off of here. But anyways, I digress. I can go through and add these things as necessary. Oftentimes when you come in here, I might, I will have to make a new exposition question and then embed it directly. So at this point, I'm going to keep it at this level. You can play around with it. When we come back from lunch, I'll spend a few minutes in order to go through this again in order to make sure that we can put this in place. The biggest issue in making a learning tree is not creating the learning tree. This is also very similar to the biggest issue in remixing textbook material. You have access to a lot of questions in ADAPT. You have access to, in the library, lots of pages, 1 million pages of content. So when you're remixing and you're building a collection of pages, the biggest issue is to make sure that you find the pages that you like, the pages that reflect what you want your book to be. The same thing as here is when you're building a learning tree, you want to be able to ask what are the skills necessary in order to be successful for the root question. And that may take time because that requires a subject matter expert, or at least someone pretty proficient at the subject matter, in order to be able to come in and say, this question here requires this skill, and this skill. Okay. So we write that down on a piece of paper, and I like to use just scrap paper in order to do this. And it's okay, now these are the 3 skills. What do I want? How do I want to convince or teach students those skills? Do I want to just take text from the textbook? Do I want to put a video? Do I want to include some simulation? And then I have to build that out. And then I say, what type of branch assessment do I want to put down at the end of that exposition or that branch in order to test if the student learned that skill? That's the real, and then find the question that addresses that. And that goes into the the meta tags and the searching capability that Martin was actually going through there. That right there is actually 80% of the effort, meaning 80% is not building the trees that we're doing here. You got to do all this work. When you're remixing a book, we call that a remixing map, which means before you start remixing, you need to know what you're going to remix with. It's the same sort of structure that's off of there and such. So at that, I'm going to stop. When we come back, I'll show a little bit of, actually I can pull up some of the PowerPoint files that we used when we built these maps on a PowerPoint file first before going into making it via the interface here and start playing around with the interface and putting it together. And if you have time, I encourage you to go about doing it now over your break and such. With that, let's come back at in 1 hour. So that will be 1:15 Pacific time. It'll be 4:15 Eastern time. And then I'll give a short overview again of these learning trees and just show you how to play around. Hopefully you played around before then. And then we'll do a branch off. I'm going to give you again, in your breakout room, a little bit of an exercise for licensing, and then start playing around with the learning trees. With that, hold your questions, and then we can actually deal with them in an hour. So I hope you share my enthusiasm from learning trees. I think it's the coolest thing in the world. So.